What is going on, investors? Hopefully you guys are doing well at their time to talk about Coinbase. Company just reported their Q2 earnings after the bell. Now, before that, the stock was down about 3.85% to about $269 per share. In the after hours, we're seeing it sell off just at the current time, down another 1%. So we'll talk about what that means from a technical perspective. If you recall, here on the channel, we did videos on Coinbase right when it went public. Okay, this thing was like $300 or $400 per share. And when we get over to these financials, if you recall, here on the channel, I fell in love with this company, just fell in love from a financial perspective. These financials are once in a decade type of financials that you see with companies. These types of companies just simply don't come public very often with those types of financials. But guess what? I passed on the stock, waited for a lower price. We'll talk about if that lower price is here from a technical perspective, if we can come in here and buy Coinbase at a lower price, because let me tell you what, the fundamentals all add up on this one. Now, the Q2 earnings came in. The press release is going to read, EPS beats by $3.84. They beat on revenue, but you might wonder, well, the stock was down 3.85%. Now it's down another 1%. So investors are obviously not liking something. I think potentially at the current time, we've got some increased regulatory scrutiny on the crypto space. Now, here's the deal is right now at the current time, a bipartisan bill is working its way through Congress and the Senate and those types of things. And it looks like it's going to pass the Senate. And the one thing in Washington that both Democrats and Republicans agree on is when they're close to passing a bill, this is like the one thing both sides agree on. When they're both about to pass a bill, they slip a bunch of stuff in this bill that has nothing to do with what the bill actually does. It's called pork. And they're going to do that with this infrastructure bill. And it looks like there's some cryptocurrency stuff in there. So there's definitely some crypto regulation. There's some language in there related to crypto. It certainly will relate to Coinbase. We'll see what happens, though. With Washington, you always want to wait until the bill's actually signed and sealed and delivered and the lawyers get to interpret the law. But I think that could be overhanging on Coinbase stock at the current time. Now, we're going to jump into the fundamentals. I'm going to save you a bunch of time today. I don't think Coinbase's balance sheet means anything. This is a company with a crystal clean balance sheet. Yes, they have some customer funds on the liability side, but other than that, there's not a lot of liabilities. They've got a ton of cash, obviously recently gone public. This is also a wildly profitable company. Now, from a cash flow perspective, I'm going to show you this company has $4 billion worth of revenue. So total revenue over at Coinbase for the last 6 months, $4 billion. Cash flows from operations for the last 6 months, $7.4 billion. This is why most bank stocks, Bank of America, JP Morgan, they don't actually produce cash flow statements because they don't make any sense from a banking perspective. So you don't need to read the cash flows, at least from a cash flows from ops. If you want to see how much money they've been raising, spending on the business, those types of things. Again, I think those are rather insignificant. I don't think investors are really paying too much attention to those. What I think investors are looking at is the regulatory stuff that's going on in Washington, but also these fundamentals. And let me tell you what, you can look at stock financial documents like I have for nearly 2 decades, and they are not going to get much better than this, okay? I'm going to tell you right here, right now, here on the program, other than FANG, Coinbase might have some of the best fundamentals I've ever seen in a stock at the current time, and maybe even potentially in the future. We'll see what happens. Now, for the 3 months ended here, our left-hand column is our most recent column. The right-hand column is year over year on a 6-month basis. So we get 6 months into the year and then in the most recent quarter. Let's take a look at our total revenue. Last year, we were at $186 million. Yeah, that's right. $186 million. Oh my pure mother of growth. We went to $2.23 billion. Yeah, we went from $186 million worth of revenue last year on a quarterly basis all the way up to $2.2 billion. That is growth you don't see anywhere. Okay, you can combine dozens of companies together and you won't see that type of growth. Coinbase is unbelievably growing so quickly. I almost don't believe it. Now, from a total revenue perspective for the last 6 months, holds true as well. Went from 377, that's 377 million, up to over $4 billion worth of revenue. If all things remain equal for Coinbase, they should easily top between 8 and 10 billion. Yes, $8 to $10 billion for the full year. Because here's our 6 months. We can times our revenue by 2, saying, hey, if the next 6 months go like the previous 6 months with no growth, we'll get to $8 billion. Add in a little bit of growth, you might get all the way up to $10 billion worth of revenue on this one. Let's take a look at the valuation. Okay, you got a market cap of $53 billion. Guys, that is like 5 times. So you're paying like 5 times sales right now on Coinbase, and you've got growth that I can't even calculate. This is like 100x growth. That seems like a pretty good valuation to me. Now we'll come all the way down to earnings and analyze it from that perspective as well. We got these other operating expenses. So off $2.2 billion worth of revenue, we've got all these operating expenses. Now, one thing I want to remind you is Coinbase just recently went public. And obviously when companies go public, they have to hire office staff, CPAs, lawyers, those types of things. So we see a big ballooning of costs, particularly this general administrative. But at some point, I don't know if it's going to be this year or maybe even into next year, this thing will flatten out a little bit and it'll help these numbers out a little bit. But across the board, when you're growing these revenues this high, obviously all your other expenses are going to balloon. But honestly, it's not that bad. Take a look at this. Total operating expenses went from $144 million up to $1.35 billion. So we take this $2.2 billion minus $1.35 billion, and we get positive operating income of $874 million. Take a look for the last 6 months. We had positive operating income right at $1.9 billion. You can round that up if you want to $2 billion. Okay. Now, again, we can annualize this number out. You want to give them credit between we'll give them credit between $4 and $5 billion worth of operating income. Again, we've got a $53 billion valuation. So you're paying what, 10 times, 11, 12 times operating income? Again, doesn't necessarily seem wildly overvalued at the current time. Last year, we're sitting at $80 million. Yeah, we went from $80 million worth of operating income for 6 months to $1.8 billion in a year. I tell you what, if they do this again, which I don't think they'll be able to do, but if some reason Coinbase is able to double this next year, oh my God, this company, the stock is wildly undervalued in my opinion. Now, you come down to net income, you had some weird, funky stuff going on with taxes. So they had a provision for income, or in this case, a benefit from income taxes. And so all things being considered, for the last 6 months, they netted off of $4 billion worth of revenue. This is for 6 months. The net income was $2.4 billion. That is incredible. I mean, think about running your own business. What if you ran your own business and off $4 million worth of sales, you netted $2 million? You literally have one of the most profitable businesses in your city by far. It's just incredible what they're doing here. You're seeing they're earning on a diluted share basis $9.60 per share. On a diluted basis, on the quarterly basis, we earned $6.42 per share. Now, speaking of dilution, that is one thing that is keeping the stock down. Okay, you went from 67,000 shares all the way up to 248,000. So way more. I mean, there's just way more shares out there for Coinbase, and so that is keeping a lid on the stock. And so going forward, you'd like to see these operating expenses start to flatten out because they're not a public company. I don't expect these revenues to like 100x, okay? Don't necessarily expect that, but if they could flatten out the dilution, boy, this company just looks absolutely fantastic from a fundamental perspective, from a profit perspective, and even from a traditional valuation perspective. It's not even close to being overvalued, which is amazing because most companies that go public at this stage are wildly, just ridiculously overvalued. Now, from a technical perspective, we talked about this stock right when it first went public and went all the way up to $400 something and then sold off like a lot of IPO stocks does, because what happens is a lot of the insiders sell, they issue more shares, they do more warrants, they raise more money off the back of the public stock. That's not a problem. I don't really have a problem with that, especially when I don't own shares. And I don't own shares of Coinbase, but I guarantee you I am loving what I'm seeing here. Now, we're still in an uptrend here, okay? We bottomed out here. The stock looks like a stone cold buy when it gets down to about $214 per share. I'm not necessarily, especially when this is going to be a buy and hold investment for me. This is something I'd like to hold for a period of time. Coinbase looks, like it wants to bottom down at 214. You don't necessarily, if you got it down here at 214, I think it's a good buy. I'd hold on to it. Now, it's not necessarily something I'm trying to do is get here at the rock bottom, but I certainly, absolutely try not to buy at the tops, okay? Because this stock was all the way up to $430 per share. And obviously, if you double the valuation of Coinbase, it would just throw the valuation and all the things that we talked about out of whack. But where it is now, I like where it's at. Okay, I think anywhere, especially if we come down to about 250, there's some demand here at 250. I'd like to buy some shares right there at 267, 260, where the stock is right now. Not necessarily a bad spot. I think this thing has a high probability of walking back here at about 260. That's probably where I'd pick up a share or two of this one. If it falls for some reason below 249, well, this shorter term uptrend, we're actually in an uptrend on this stock. Okay, we made a bottom down here at 215, made a higher low here at 230, and it looks like we're trying to farm another higher low somewhere in this 250 to 260 range. This uptrend, believe it or not, down here is still intact for a while. Okay, this stock would actually have to break below, in my opinion, really all the way down below like 240. They'd have to break these lows between 230 and 240 to really be concerned about this shorter term uptrend and kind of this bottoming. I think this looks like to me a stock that is finding its bottom. Okay, right? Euphoria, massive sell off, bottoming consolidation down here for the last several months. And I think now Coinbase is going to send on a steady upstream of price appreciation over the coming weeks and months and maybe even potentially years ahead. I think the only thing standing in its way right now is you got Washington, D.C. wanting to put their hands in the crypto cookie jar, and we'll see what they pull out here in the next coming days and weeks ahead with this bill that looks like it might have, as we speak, it might be already passing this Senate, and we'll see once it makes its way to the president's desk to see what's actually in it and how it's interpreted by the lawmakers. So, I love Coinbase. From a traditional valuation perspective, believe it or not, a recently IPO'd stock at $53 billion, not necessarily overvalued, okay? And we've got absolutely phenomenal fundamentals. Profit, revenue, this is a profitable company. I think they can continue to be profitable. The only things that are holding over this stock is a regulatory perspective and a competition perspective as well, because the last thought I'm going to leave you here is other companies, including Apple, including Amazon, including Microsoft, including lots and lots of companies with lots of money. What are they doing? They're looking at this revenue growth. They're looking at this net income, and they're saying, I bet we could do that too. So Coinbase could have some competition come down the pike. But if they are able to move quickly, they will become the brand name in the space. And I think this could be a decent investment. Not necessarily one I'd stake my whole portfolio around, but certainly a portion of your investment, especially from a slightly speculative side, could go to Coinbase. And this stock could really take off if they keep that revenue growth and profitability continuing in the future. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed this video. We'll be back again soon with more. Good luck with your investments.